Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 120.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Hello, Keith Parsons again with Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast. Today I have Chris Avants. Chris is a instructor, senior instructor, author, and a consultant. And he was also a presenter at WLPC EU in Lisbon just a couple weeks ago, and thought it'd be a good chance to bring him on the podcast, let you hear a little bit from where he's coming from, and talk a little about his topic from there, which was called Understanding the Full Data Path. Chris, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Keith?
Good. You're home?
Yeah, I'm finally home. Just got back from my fourth country this month, so quite a bit of travel.
Just a little bit of travel.
Just a little bit, yeah.
But that's how you get paid. So we don't mind travel when they pay you for it.
Exactly. And hey, Keith, thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Oh, glad to have you here. So the presentation you gave at WPC in EU was Understand the Full Data Path. Before we get in there, can you just do a recap, since you're a Cisco instructor? If someone was getting new into the whole wireless LAN industry and they wanted to focus on Cisco, what would be a kind of a path through the Cisco training / exams to get them on a good path? Not all the way through CCIEW, but where would someone get started?
Right. And that's a great question, Keith, because a lot of people ask that coming from other industries and other vendors about certifications, because really with Cisco, there's kind of a new first step in the door, which is really network fundamentals. It's called a CCENT, or a Cisco Certified Entry Network Technician. And we do a class for that. That's ICND Part 1, which covers the required learning objectives for a CCENT certification, which is largely around like TCP/IP fundamentals, OSI model, bits, frames, packets, segments, all of those kind of great things.
So this used to be included in the original CCNA route switch.
Exactly.
Kind of broken apart.
Yeah. So whenever I first did my CCNA, there was only 3 certifications at the time Cisco offered. There was a CCNA, a CCNP, and a CCIE. And obviously that's grown over time. There's, 40 or 50 different certifications that they offer across like 7 or 8 different verticals in the technology space. So quite a bit going on there, but yeah, they want everybody to start off with those network fundamentals because, it plays a part in everything that we do, whether it's wireless, whether it's security, collaboration, or anything else.
So the base and the cert has a different name than the course.
Yeah, it does with Cisco. So, and that actually happens quite a few times. But with the CCENT, the course is ICND Part 1, or Interconnecting Cisco Network Devices Part 1. And then the certification is called Cisco Certified Entry Network Technician. And that's actually the first step. Now, I was saying whenever I first did my certification, CCNA, CCNP, and CCIE, the CCENT is looked at as right below a CCNA, but CCNAs are all now specialized. So for example, if I did a full CCNA today, I would be a CCNA specializing in routing and switching. So there's no more just CCNA anymore. It all has to be specialized. So if you did like CCENT, for example, and you wanted to start specializing in wireless right after that, you would take another course called WiFund, or Wireless Fundamentals, and then you would become a CCNA specializing in wireless.
Just a kind of a personal question. I mean, you've been in this game for a while. Would you suggest someone start with the CCNA route switch before they do CCNA wireless?
Well, that's another great question, and that really depends. The truth is that CCENT is the new CCNA of today. That's really the first step kind of into networking. And you're going to talk about all things layer 2, layer 3, and you're going to understand really all layers of the IP stack and how the OSI model relates to all that in the CCENT now. Really, ICND2, or what would be a CCNA specializing in routing and switching today, it's a great program, and it's a great set of skills, but you do start getting pretty deep if you're going to be doing wireless. And like my presentation at the WLPC, it's a good idea for everybody to understand the full traffic path, because people have a tendency to blame the where they're connected, right? Their access method, which is largely wireless. So regardless of where their traffic is actually terminating, right? So understanding just the RF is not good enough anymore. However, if you do take the CSENT today, that pretty much helps you understand a lot of that traffic path. Maybe not all of it, but it's definitely a good foundation. And I actually wrote a blog post a while back on I believe everybody in IT should have at least a CSENT level of understanding of networking, regardless if you're in sales or service or anything, because it is that fundamental, course where it talks about all these different acronyms and all the foundational technologies. And then, if you're in technology or you're in IT and you have a problem sometimes understanding lingo or some terminology that people are using, you can learn a whole lot of that in the ICND1 course.
So ICDN1, obviously you can take it as an instructor-led course. Other options for people who don't have time or money for a instructor-led?
So absolutely, yeah. The fun thing about it is now is, back whenever we started, we had to basically acquire lots of gear. This was another presentation that I did there actually, and I would spend thousands of dollars on routers and switches that obviously I didn't need. I just needed them to learn the theory. Nowadays, there's more avenues than ever to get certified. There's video on demand. There's great books that are out there. There was like a couple key books back in the day that I think most of us used if you're around in the mid to late 90s, which is like TCP/IP in a nutshell, or TCP/IP fundamentals. And that's really what we had. Now, of course, there's more than ever to start that journey. There's Viral, there's Packet Tracer that's now, free to everybody. So, but there's nothing that beats having an instructor available to you to ask questions, and also that's so they can see how you're doing with the concepts, right? Because if the instructor, as you know, can see your face, we can make adjustments and do what we can to help you learn that required material. That
deer in the headlights look we all know so well.
Exactly.
So when you also teach virtualized classes. I don't know your actual term you use, but you're in one place and the students in a different place.
Right.
How do you adjust for that lack of deer in the headlights?
That's a great question, because we actually have HD telepresence at most of our sites. So we do full HD video for our online courses, and we actually, like it whenever students leave their cameras on, so we can get that face-to-face experience. And it's one of those things. Even though we tell everybody it's a great thing and you should be doing it, unfortunately, a lot of the students today, they don't like to leave their cameras on during class. So, but here's the thing: we're all fighting time. We're all fighting budgets to be able to invest in ourselves and grow our career. So. If you can't make it in front, in an actual classroom somewhere, then it is definitely probably the best, second option is still having an instructor available to you, somebody that's not just authorized to teach the course, but somebody who's been doing this stuff for, 10 or 20 years. There's nothing that really kind of beats that type of learning.
So would you recommend, if you are in a virtualized class, to leave your camera on so the instructor can watch you? That sounds bad. But
yeah.
I didn't mean to make it sound like voyeurism.
Yeah, well, and actually, I was kind of thought went off in the old mind there. I'm like, unless you have something that requires you to turn the camera off going on, and I won't call anybody out or say any names or anything like that. But yeah, so as long as you're there learning and you're not on a break or say lunch and that type of thing, then definitely leave the camera on, be interactive. The tools are there nowadays to still give us face-to-face, even if we're not right across from each other, right? So you're definitely
so it's to the student's benefit.
Yeah.
And the student gets a better experience out of it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, we're there to make sure that, you can get these concepts, and sometimes there's several ways of explaining just one concept. And if we don't know if you've truly gotten the concept or not, and sometimes, whether we like it or not, some of us have a bad habit of going, yeah, we understand, especially if, we think that others may have already gotten it and we didn't want to hold the class up or something like that. But unless we can get that visualization of you, it's really hard to go over those other ways of covering those topics.
Well, you've been an instructor for many years. I've been talking to a couple other instructors on this podcast, and I'd like to ask them the same question, which is, how much training do you personally take on an annual basis? As a student, not as a teacher.
That's a great question, Keith. And we have this motto saying that experts are always learning. The truth is, technology is changing so fast, it really is a perishable skill set. So regardless if you've earned an expert, accreditation or certification in your career, we always have to keep learning. And I make a point to at least do 2 to 3 classes a year myself of some type. So not that long ago, I took an SDN class, I took a Python class, to try to not just, master what I've learned, but learn something new. And I always go to these conferences like the WLAN Pros. I go to Cisco Live twice a year, one in the States. And, obviously I speak at these events, but I also get to learn from a lot of people as well. And so that's a win-win for me. And anybody who says that they never take training as an instructor is probably
not a very good instructor.
Well, I don't want to say not a good instructor, but let's just say maybe not current, right?
Good. So that was just kind of our preface. So just to finish up on that initial question, after the CCNT, the CCENT, and then on to whatever your CCNA specialty is, in this case wireless, what would the next steps be in the Cisco program?
Right. Yeah. So Cisco's a little bit different. Whenever all these associate level programs, they're really designed to teach you the life cycle of a technology, right? So for CCNA wireless, for example, they're going to talk to you about a little bit about the planning of it. They're going to talk to you a little bit about the design, a lot about the product portfolio and the operation of it. They're going to talk to you about the Cisco product line, and they're also going to talk to you about the troubleshooting aspects as well. And hopefully most of us listening to this are familiar with life cycle technologies, right? And whenever you get that associate level certification done, you've really scratched the surface on those different areas of the life cycle. So whenever you're ready to go more, let's say you work for a partner or you're dealing with wireless a lot, or any of the verticals a lot, but obviously we're here talking about wireless, and you want to know more, right? You want to get deeper involved. Well, at the CCNP level, that's professional level skill set. So they want you to actually complete several courses that deep dive into those different parts of the life cycle, pass the associated exams, and only then can you earn the professional level certification.
So how many additional courses / exams does it take to get a CCNP?
Well, if you're going to be doing that, and so that depends on the track, right? But for wireless, it's 4. So there's 4 courses. There's WI Design, which is around planning and design wireless networks. There's WI Deploy, which is all about configuring and deploying the technology across the 5 different deployment models that Cisco has. There's about WI Secure, which is about securing enterprise wireless networks. And then there's WIT Shoot, which is troubleshooting concepts for the Cisco enterprise wireless networks. So it's those 4 courses and those 4 related exams. Now, if you did those courses separately, it could be somewhere around 20 days of training, of course, but there are vendors out there like us that we offer that in 11 days. It's very, very, very accelerated, 10, 11, 12-hour days sometimes. But it's all, again, Keith, we talk about this sometimes. We're always fighting the amount of time that people can spend, the amount of budget they have. And so we're always trying to get them the most they can for their time and their investment, right? And that's what that's about.
So post CCNA, so that's you basically get your ICND 1 and then a Y fundamentals, Y fund, and after that it's still another 20 days or 11 if you do it kind of in a boot camp format. Yep. So CCNP wireless, those guys have 20 days worth of training behind them at a minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no joke. Of course, other vendors do professional level certs differently, but the way Cisco does it is you need to be at a professional level in the life cycle of that vertical technology like wireless. Security, there's another 4 courses, for example. Data center, there can be 4 or 5. Route switch has actually moved to just 3 courses. So it depends on, again, which vertical, and then what makes sense as far as how many classes. Does it make sense to make sure that people understand the life cycle of that technology?
And then the final one on top of that for CCIW?
CCIE wireless, yeah. Now, Cisco does an interesting thing with their expert program because, believe it or not, there's only a very, very small prerequisite to go take a CCIE lab. That prerequisite is a multi-hour, multi-hundred question exam, and it's pass-fail. So they actually, there are no other prerequisites officially, but I've never met anybody who went and did like a CCIE written and took the CCIE lab and didn't have all this other training, at least multiple parts of it, before they were able to achieve, an expert level certification in wireless.
So the CCIE written is more just a threshold to prove you can step over this bar, and then you get to take the lab.
Correct. It actually is going to talk to you about all those lifecycle technologies from the CCNA, CCNP level, and then a few extra, right? They also throw a few other things in that people should know at the expert level. They question you on it. They make sure you know it. And then you have to pass that. And that gets you no certification at all. Now, I see some people sometimes they'll post and say, I'm a CCIE written, right? That's not a certification. They get you an entrance fee, right, to go take the real certification program. The real certification program is an 8-hour day, and it's pass fail. They don't really give you they do give you a scorecard if you fail. If you don't fail and you do pass it, they don't tell you how you did. You just know you passed, right? So it's definitely the top of the Cisco program. There's only a few hundred people in the world who've been able to achieve a CCIE specializing in wireless. There's only a couple hundred people in the world. Where we're at 250, 260 in the other wireless expert program out there as well. So it's still a very small, tiny community. And we talk about this all the time, right? Because wireless became the number one network access method several years ago now, and that's just continued to blow up, right? So there's definitely a lot more room to grow in these areas, no matter the expert certification, but definitely with Cisco as well.
Well, good. Thanks for the recap of Cisco's education for the wireless thing. What I want to talk about now is the topic that you did at WOPC, and the quote, the title of it was "Understand the Full Data Path," and you had some graphics there. We'll pull some of these and add them to the show notes. But if anyone wants, you can go to wlanpros.com under resources, click on Lisbon as the site, and you can get the video of Chris doing this presentation and download the slides too. But since this is an audio podcast, we don't have much visual. You can just kind of describe what you meant by full data path. Why should wireless guys understand the whole data path?
So that's a great question, Keith. My point with that presentation is I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I know I'm not, because I've talked to a lot of people about it, where somebody has gone and done a site survey for a company. They walk through the building, they take their measurements, they place the APs, they say, hey, this is how you need to place the APs, and you're good to go. And I've seen that multiple times bite people for things like, walking in and seeing a controller that has all 8 of its ports plugged into one side of a VSH switch stack, for example, right? Or by seeing the addition of wireless overload already overloaded uplinks, right? So and creating latency on the network. So if you don't think about where the traffic is actually, how traffic is actually flowing, where it's terminating, you can introduce a whole lot more problems on the infrastructure, some of which may have not even been there until you implemented wireless if you're not careful with it. And so that's what I was trying to do, is just get everybody to understand, yes, learning RF is fun, it's great, and we all need to know that. It's critical. You can't fix, a wireless network if the RF is not right. But there's a whole lot more protocols that we use in networking, and we have to understand where they begin, where they terminate, because there's a lot more than just RF that has to do with the end user experience. And I mean, that's the goal, no matter what network we're designing. But especially wireless, and especially anything for client end users, we're designing for a good end user experience, right? Or QoE, quality of experience. And there's just more than RF that comes into that, and that's what that presentation was about.
Go ahead and just give a recap of the presentation in a couple of minutes. What were your main ideas there?
Yeah, so main ideas again was making sure that people understood things like distance, standard cabling distances from APs to switch closets. If I go and I give somebody an RF design and I say, this is where you're going to place your APs, do you know if that AP is within distance of one of their IDFs, for example, to not go past cabling standards? Sure, we can go a few feet over those standards, but more than that, we may end up having some problems because of that. Do you know that they have the switch real estate, for example, to place all those APs and actually have available switch ports, have available ports with the correct PoE for those APs to operate the way that they're supposed to. Very simple things like that. Not all switches have PoE on all interfaces. I asked a question there. I said, does anybody know how many different versions of Power over Ethernet there are, right? Because there's standards, and then there's also Cisco variants of those protocols as well. And I'm sure there's a couple other vendors with their own protocols as well. So it's not just the standards, but you also have these vendor protocols. Then beyond that, it's, high availability mechanisms. What happens if, a controller fails? What happens if you place controllers in different data centers for geo redundancy, for example, and you have too much latency between those controllers? That example that I gave you guys about the, one controller plugging into one side of a VSS switch stack. Well, VSS, that's one logical switch. If I would have just divided the cables, if that one switch fails, your wireless infrastructure is down, right? So if they would have just understood that next layer involved with them connecting those controllers, they would have known that they could have made that, physical redundancy for the controller. And if one side fails, then, hey, you're still rocking and rolling. And that's just really kind of my point. Where are you authenticating at? Where are your authentication servers? If I have APs out at remote sites, are they locally switched or centrally switched? That's a big difference. I've been at many sites and many clients back in the day. They didn't know there was an option to terminate client traffic locally if it was a controller-based solution. They just, they understood Wi-Fi, and they understood that we had this centralization thing. But then they didn't understand there was an option where, hey, we don't have to send doubly tax the WAN with traffic. We could just keep that traffic locally if we need to. Or we could authenticate people locally if we need to, as a redundancy mechanism, or as maybe that's preferred to keep that traffic from going across the WAN. So, and then things like secure guest access, right? Secure guest access solutions I've seen done many, many different ways, but some people will go to great lengths to protect the VLAN and create ACLs and do all these things that are really not as necessary. Yes, you need those things, but there is what quote unquote secure guest access solutions, right? Mobility messaging is a tunneling thing, right? So if you just understood that architecture, we would know that if we put controllers in the DMZ, for example, that traffic, even though it's guest and choosing the internal APs, that could be tunneled outside of the network into the DMZ securely, right? And so I don't have to go through as much of these elaborate schemes to try to protect traffic, because they would never see the inside of the network anyway. So that's just a few examples. There's many, many more. But that's what I'm saying. You don't have to be a master. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a CCNP or CCIE route switch. What I'm saying is that you need to be aware of anywhere client traffic may traverse, and just kind of understand the role that may play in your designs.
Totally agree with you. There's a big difference between when it leaves the AP and it's now an Ethernet frame, it's still not delivered. So we can design the RF side all we want, and the user experience, that QoE as you used, is still affected. I was at a hotel at it should have been extremely good. And what happened was my client was associated literally at 1.3 gig. They had a fantastic Wi-Fi. My laptop was connected, and I was pulling 512K. So it was pretty obvious that the RF, they did a great design on the RF, but their wired infrastructure was down. So I think all of us in the wireless industry, since we're normally the ones that get blamed, because any problem that's using wireless as access is a wireless problem, of course.
Yep.
We need to be able to walk through the whole user traffic flow all the way back to wherever it needs to go. And if you don't understand that, it's still going to look like it was a wireless problem.
Exactly. And the opposite is truth, right? Where may not be a wired problem, maybe it's a Wi-Fi problem, and that's in the wireless industry. That should be something we're natively good at, right? But oftentimes you see these other issues where unfortunately, there's just so many moving parts. So we have a lot to be responsible for, and I'm sure most of the people that listen to us are going to be like, yeah, I've been in both of their shoes before, right? And that's what that presentation was all about.
And on a totally different note now, helping others who might be just starting into this career. I know you've been through on a couple different sides, but in this industry, we have customers, the end users who are doing it. We have the resellers who are the VARs, systems integrators. We have vendors who actually make products. Then sometimes there's some independent consultants or professional services folks. I know you've been on a couple of sides of that line. Tell us how being on multiple sides of that equation has helped you be better at doing your job.
Yeah. So, this was actually, there was another presentation I did there called Experience and the Multiple Ways to Get It. Right. And these are kind of two things that are kind of near and dear to me. And you explained exactly why. I feel that one of the reasons I've been able to grow and get where I've gotten in the industry and very blessed to be where I'm at, is because I have seen many sides of the coin. Right. I've been involved mostly a lot of times working for value-added resellers and integrators and partners. I've also worked for some of the manufacturers, and as you've said, I've had a lot of different roles over the years, but I've been exposed to lots of different things, and I feel pretty blessed for that. Now, not saying if you're not working for like a VAR or an integrator or something like that, or a similar role, that you should stop and try to find one and work for them at all. I'm just saying that it is very good to get exposed to as much as you can, right? So I mentioned in one of the presentations, I'm not sure which one, but police are not the only one who's allowed ride-alongs, right? So you may do 3 or 4. We did a poll and we found that if you worked for a static company, you may do 1 to 2 new projects, sometimes 3 or 4. That was number 2 for everybody's answer, a year with that company, 3 or 4 projects a year. And that's great. That's great experience. But, if there's a great community here, and this is one thing everybody definitely agrees on, is Wi-Fi has an excellent community. You can definitely ask for help. You can go out with people. You can do ride-alongs with people. If you think somebody does wireless design or surveys really good, I'm sure they'd be willing to help out or let you do a ride-along one day, right? Because
everyone needs more feet when they're doing data collection.
Exactly. And it's a win-win for you both, right? So, it's just, I'm surprised more people aren't doing it, is the thing, right? But it's definitely good to get as much side of the experience as you can and get as much hands-on time with things as you can. And I'm a very big proponent of also people investing in themselves and building labs. You may talk about 1 to 2 projects a year, or if you work for an integrator, maybe 4 or 5, or sometimes 7 if you're doing smaller projects. Bigger projects always take more time. But I could do 4 or 5, 6, 7 projects a day, or simulated projects a day if I have the lab infrastructure and workbooks to practice that. And that's really, honestly, that's kind of what the CCA Wireless put you through. Whenever we do those classes, that's literally 5 days. Everybody's going home at midnight, and they start off at 8 a.m. literally working through labs. And some of them who've never done that before, they're like, I thought there was all this, extra theory and extra things. And it's like, no, by the time you're here, you should be good with the theory. We should be now to how can we implement that theory as fast as possible and as rapidly as possible while getting it right. It's a different skill set.
And see the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes we get all focused on just our piece.
Yep.
And realize, so one of the things I think CCA Lab's good for is you've got to know the whole stack.
Yep. Yeah, where most people get stuck, believe it or not, Keith, where most of our students get stuck is the wired technologies, is things like spanning tree, right? And ether channel and the load balancing of ether channel. It may seem simple to all the CCA route switches or CCNP route switches out there to talk about these things, but that's what I'm saying. If you're solely focused on the same task all the time, even if you're excellent at it, if you don't kind of expand your horizons and think a little outside the box every now and then yeah, you can definitely be brought down by something as simple as that. One of the students came to me one time at a CCI wireless boot camp and said he left after 2 hours because he could not get the APs to register to the controllers. And he knew that if it took 2 hours to get APs to register to the controllers, that he wasn't going to finish in 8 hours, right? So, and it's not that it seems like some magic thing to do that, but they don't have everything set to default values, right? I mean, their job is there to test you and make sure that, that if something comes up, you know how to go about fixing it and doing it quickly. And, he was pretty excited after that first week, because I think it was in the first 2 hours he figured out, hey, this is exactly what I saw. This is exactly what I should have known. And now I'd never have a problem, fixing that. But here's the thing, right? Everything's easy if you know how, right? You just got to learn it.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great quote. For those who know how, it is easy.
Absolutely.
Well, good. The last line in your takeaway, you said something about you need to learn to program. So how did you go about doing that in your own career?
Well, it's funny because back in high school, I actually took some programming classes. I took like BASIC and COBOL, and there was only I think 6 or 10 of us in that class because it wasn't very popular.
You said COBOL. I don't think you're that old.
Yeah, I'm that old. Yeah. Or at least the class in my high school was that old, one of the two. But yeah, so and I took it and I enjoyed it back in the time, and then I started getting in the infrastructure and networking. So, I like those things. And then, you start getting involved in everything you do day to day. And now the world has finally figured out that if we can automate some of, networking tasks with programming, that, hey, that's much easier than having to do, the same mundane task over and over and over again. And obviously, companies like Cisco and both HP came out this year with software-defined controllers and, this new ACI and SDN concepts everywhere. It's going to be quite a while before those things get implemented, but a lot of things can be definitely expedited and be made more efficient through simple scripting and programming. It's not like you have to turn into a programmer and program 80 hours a week for the rest of your life. But if you just learn the power of these tools sometimes, and you just kind of learn the basics, you yourself can do things more efficiently, right? So, I started back in high school, and I really haven't done a lot with it for a while. I recently took a Python class, which was excellent because it kind of brought back a lot of those things I learned. And whether you know it or not, even if you don't program, if you're in IT and let's say you work with ClearPass or ICE, for example, Cisco ICE, you're programming. You may not realize it. You may not be writing every line of code, but that's what those policy sets are. It is literally a series of if, then, else statements, right? And so, just because it's coding or you're behind an unfamiliar interface doesn't mean that it's got to be scary or unique. It's all about investing in yourself and investing time in yourself. And like we said in both presentations, there is no better investment. And you'll learn that as you do more of it.
Well, great. Sure. I appreciate your time today, Chris, talking a little bit about Cisco's program and about understanding the full stack and basically talking a little bit about wireless LAN careers. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you. Appreciate being on.
Wi-Fi question of the day
with Lee Badman.
Well, Lee, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing great. So what's the Wi-Fi cue that you're going to highlight for us today?
Kind of a common pain point for a lot of people. I asked the community why they thought that so many service providers and people who ought to know better end up selecting poor channels and poor channel widths when they deploy. And the conversation quickly went to, this is more an ISP thing than it is a trained, wireless professional problem. But, just good general banter and a lot of supposition that, the likes of Comcast and other ISPs, not to pick on Comcast, just throwing them out there as an example, perhaps the technicians just aren't trained. Maybe they don't understand that, the non-overlaps are truly the non-overlaps, and the areas between those non-overlaps are, a place that you should not be going rather than where you go every time. So some training and education problems. But, it also, if you zoom out a little bit, also kind of represents a sad disconnect, if you will, between people that are, actually putting this stuff out there in massive quantities when you're talking ISPs and the likes of the, Wi-Fi Alliance and, maybe having a lack of skilled management at these places that are not really providing any leadership on it. And then another interesting angle from that fundamental question was, just kind of some rhetorical contemplation. Why are the device manufacturers not putting out a device that you can't get wrong? Why aren't they putting out something that you can't screw up and limit it to only 1.6 and 11 and 2.4 and don't even make the other ones available for people to make mistakes with? But, at the end of the exercise for this particular Wi-Fi Q, a lot of, call it preaching to the choir, misery loves company. Pick your cliche, but I think we had it all going on there, and absolutely a common lament.
So did anyone have any good theories of why manufacturers aren't making the idiot-proof device?
You'd have to go beyond. You'd have to have just more than one model, more than one feature set, I guess, or it's one more thing you have to do, which, might cost you a couple of pennies per unit if you laid in alternative firmware or whatever. And, money is everything, and probably just not enough pain being expressed, grassroots to even make them aware of it. I'm sure a lot of people turning it out have no clue how their stuff is being used.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee.
Yep.
10 Talks.
Okay, so I'm Veli-Pekka Ketonen from 7Signal. I go by VP, much easier to remember, of course. I'm a VP on wireless in Twitter, so if you want to follow me, go ahead and do that. So I'm all about Wi-Fi performance, like we at 7Signal are. We call ourselves Wi-Fi performance company. We provide solutions for measuring, analyzing Wi-Fi performance and end-user aspects. And as Keith has mentioned, I have a training session this evening at 7 p.m. if you want to learn more. This presentation is not about our products or our technologies, but this is about something exciting, new happening with the Wi-Fi and those new standards that Consuelo mentioned and new certifications from Wi-Fi Alliance. So I will dig a little bit deeper to those, and I hope that you will find insights from that explanation. And if you want to download the presentation, you can do that at go.7signal.com/WLPC. As well, you can see there all my previous presentations. So if you want to see older Wi-Fi performance management presentations, go ahead and just download them all there at once. Okay. All right. So I will start from the standards, from the alphabet soup, basically. K, V, R, A, I, U stuff, and it can be complex. And I will start, the K, V, and R kind of go together usually. Okay, does it support KVR? Okay, yeah, it supports, that's great. I'll start from K. So K is radio resource management, so it provides measurement capabilities. I try to remember the K, what is the K, like key performance indicator, K, KPI. Measurements, data. So that's the way to remember what is K. And with K, there are a number of things. There are about 10 different things there which relate to measurements. Not all of them are implemented. It's good to kind of realize that if someone says that device supports K, it doesn't mean that it supports everything in K, or same for the V. It supports certain features in those standards. So anyway, in K, neighbor reports and beacon reports are most relevant, most kind of utilized at this time. But there are more things coming through and more capabilities included in the standard. So then next one is the wireless network management, the V standard. And it has about 20 different things, controls, measurements, things like that. The most relevant at this time is the BSS transition management. So either client can ask help me to find new AP, or network can tell client, hey, you should go there, you would be better off. So that's the V. So fast transition R, that's the fast roaming for radios, and it's a topic itself, obviously. I did a separate presentation or webinar on the roaming aspects, and if you Google my name and Wi-Fi roaming, then you might find it in YouTube. As well, the presentation is in the material pack that you can download from our website. So, but that's fast roaming. There are some incompatibilities with R. So some legacy clients might not support, so you might not be able to always turn on R. So then the next one is very exciting. So AI. So that's kind of completed last year. It has a lot of potential, very exciting standard. Provides fast setups, link setups, fast discovery, authentication, DHCP, and reduces as well management traffic. I will get back to that in a moment. Then the U, and this is the interworking with other networks, and especially between Wi-Fi and cellular networks, and providing capabilities for them to kind of deal with each others. So that's the scope of the U. Okay, so how does this all play out? So here are those two programs that Consuelo mentioned. So Wi-Fi Agile multiband and then Wi-Fi optimized connectivity. So Wi-Fi Agile multiband is made of KVR, U, and Wi-Fi Alliance technologies. And then on the other hand, the Wi-Fi optimized connectivity is made of Wi-Fi Agile multiband and then some AI, especially AI and some K, and then Wi-Fi Alliance developed capabilities. So that's how these two standards play out. So the Wi-Fi Agile multiband is the prerequisite for the optimized connectivity. And the optimized connectivity is still to be released, maybe later this year or next year. Consuelo has more details if you want to know. The specifications for my Wi-Fi Agile multiband, that's now public, but the optimized connectivity, that's still kind of in drafting phase, so it's not complete yet. Okay, so let's move on and look deeper into this multiband. So it comes from, the KVR provide a number of features there. So neighbor reports and beacon reports. Neighbor reports, what are they? Well, APs can go off channel and scan what other APs there are in this area. And clients can then ask that, okay, which channels I should scan. So this allows clients to save time when they scan. So they scan only those channels which actually have some APs. So you save time, a lot of it, because you don't need to scan everything. So very smart. Beacon reports, on the other hand, are something that AP asks the client to do. So client is measuring, okay, what do I hear? Which APs do I see here? Which signal levels? And then clients return that information back to the AP. And then AP can use that information to, select channels better, steer clients better for these kind of purposes, which happens then with the help of the V standard. So these all play together very nicely, at least in theory. Of course, we hope that it will work like that in practice as well, and that's what Wi-Fi Alliance is doing, certifying this so that everything should work and be packaged. Okay, transition management. So PSS transition management can be client initiated. So client can ask, hey, I'm in a trouble, help me. I need to find new AP. So kind of will ask the AP, help me, find the next AP, and AP will then, provide prioritized list of available APs. On the other hand, we as well supports network steering Wi-Fi clients, and this is something that usually hasn't been supported in Wi-Fi. Client makes the decision in Wi-Fi what comes to the roaming. Client decides. But with this technology, network can kind of tell client that, okay, you are going to go over there, or what? Well, client still has to say. So client still, okay, I don't want to go there. So, but anyway, that's a way to try to force the client to roam. So that's a very exciting opportunity. Of course, then how this is applied depends on the vendor. So the algorithms are still vendor specific. Then the R, as we discussed that already, provides very fast roaming with the radius when supported. And that's optional for the agile multiband. Okay. Then other technologies. So then there is the interworking with the other networks. And this is to help to manage the connections between the cellular and with the Wi-Fi networks, so that AP can actually tell that, well, you should be better off in cell, so why don't you go there if the AP is out of capacity or network is out of capacity. And then Wi-Fi alliance features, so kind of band steering type of things, which will be then more standardized. So it's not just a vendor-specific implementation, but a kind of common way of handling those. Reason codes for moving clients. So if a client is forced to move with V, then there's a reason code. This is why you need to move. Timeout. So if you can throttle clients if they start to bombard the AP with some messaging, you can rate limit or kind of throttle those requests. And then again the KV and U interoperation there to help the cellular networks and then the Wi-Fi operate efficiently together. So these are the multi-band technologies, and these are then required to do the optimized connectivity. And optimized connectivity, key technologies there. So fast initial network connection is the first thing. So this FILS fast initial link setup is used there. This whole AI standard is originated from a kind of Tokyo Metro use case where people come in very fast, a lot of APs, chaos, a lot of clients APs, and then they move on. And Wi-Fi traditionally has been slow to authenticate and get the IP and everything. So the passengers are already in the train before they get authenticated, if ever. So to address this problem, this has been developed. It should significantly help to authenticate. So it's for consecutive authentication. So the very first one will be standard radius, but from there on, the system will remember like weeks or even months that you were once here. If you come back, it will be 100 milliseconds or in that range, and you are connected. By the way, which includes as well IP address. So the IP and DHCP is integrated to this protocol, so it will be instant when you get the connection. So you get authenticated, you get the IP, and you are ready to go. So it's very exciting technology in my opinion. So reduction in management frame overhead. So this is very interesting for radio, guys here. So we know that Wi-Fi can be very congested. So what can we do to help with that? Well, first of all, there is additional frame added between beacons, which is kind of counterintuitive. Okay, hey, we have already enough beacons, so why would you add 3 or 4 more beacons in between there? Well, this is one of the strategies which helps clients to use passive scanning to find the APs. So currently, big problem is that clients probe so aggressively, and then they get a ton of probe responses, and those probe responses consume all the airtime. So to avoid that, this is a way to help the roaming. So there will be very small frames between the beacons, which can be detected with the passive scans. Then broadcast probe response. So probe responses actually will be, when you get a lot of probing, you get a ton of probe responses. Currently, only the one client can use all those. So all clients require own probe responses, which is kind of silly knowing that, the clients are trying to figure out which APs are there. So those will be broadcast. So if there are a lot of probe responses, then that will already, support, help to roam fast. Okay, then probe deferral and suppression. So there will be some rules. How often can you probe? And clients need to first passively scan before they can probe. And then there will be a new minimum rate set for beaconing. So no more 1 megabit, out of the box beaconing. So that's really good. I think that will help a lot, especially small business home areas. Channel scan prioritization. So channel reports will be used to help to find the right APs, right networks. Reduced neighbor reports. So beacons can include already information about the neighbor networks. So again, passive means for figuring out where should I go. Very powerful. Non-overlapping channels. Well, this is about the 2.4 being chunk band, but kind of banning the use of the channels in between 1, 6, 11. So that can help to avoid some interference there. Then use best link in terms of quality. So there are some matrices which provide for the radio part and as well for the back-end part information about available capacity. So when the AP decides to roam, it already knows, yes, there is capacity, so I should use that. So the clients can make right decisions about roaming. And then RSSI-based association rejection. So if there is a very distant AP client, they can't connect with 1 megabit per second and then hog all the airtime. So you can prevent that from happening. So that's a kind of a common and standardized way of doing that. Obviously, some vendors already have implementations doing something similar. Okay, good. So I'm pretty much out of time. I need to finish quick, but I want to show this quickly. So this is a large arena example. This is how much probe responses consume airtime there. So it's running minimum rate 24 megabit per second, 20 megahertz channels, 20 of them. Arena. Probe responses during the events consume almost 40% of the airtime. So think if you can cut these like here, how much more capacity the network will have. Very powerful feature there. Same for the authentication delay. So when the utilization goes up, then the authentication starts to last longer because the round trip times and communication is slower. So cutting all this down with these new technologies is very, very promising. So to sum it up, there are great benefits from these new certifications and new technologies, coming up, and I'm really excited to see how much these can improve Wi-Fi performance overall.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @WirelessLANPros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter @KeithRParsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.